Good evening and welcome to the Return Homestead. Today we are working on the tomatoes. We've gotten them all trellised up. They have reached the trellis. They're starting to climb now, and we've got to remove all of the lower branches that we can. We're going to be taking off all of the lower branches right up to the area where it's fruiting. And we'll leave the branches above the fruit. The fruit does need to have some shade on it while it's growing. So let's get started. We've got 300 plants to go. We got a lot of tomatoes on already.
I'm not sure what happened to that. It got cut or something.
There's actually going to be quite a few branches we can't take off because they would be well above where the tomatoes are right now. So we're going to let those tomatoes develop, and we'll clip those branches off later when we can. Taking off the lower branches actually serves two different purposes. It's going to open the plant up on the bottom to allow for better airflow, and that's going to help with preventing the powdery mildew. It also keeps the bottom leaves up away from the dirt, and that can help to stop the blight from starting too soon. So the blight is what usually ends up killing your tomatoes in the end. At the end of the season, the leaves will turn all yellow and then they'll shrivel up, turn black, and it'll just kind of work its way up the plant from the lower branches. So we're going to try to stave that off as long as we can by keeping the tomatoes well trimmed. We're also looking for suckers as we go through here, but occasionally we'll leave the sucker and take off the side branch. It really depends on just how stout the sucker is.
We're also going to be looking for cat-faced blooms.
Cat-faced blooms?
Yes. Cat face is when you get 2 and 3 blooms crunched together. The tomato that you receive out of that is going to be mostly core. For each bloom, a tomato will grow.
So we get 1 tomato per bloom, but if you've got 3 blooms that are all shoved together and growing as one, you'll end up with this weird, massive tomato that's really not very useful. So we do try to take those off when we find them. And I found one over here on the second plant. So this is kind of what you're looking for when you're looking for a cat-faced bloom. Even if that produces a tomato, that tomato is going to be such a mess that there's no way we'd be able to use it. So we'll want to go ahead and cut that off. This is actually right on the top of the main stem too. I'm not too worried about cutting the main stem. We've got plenty of other stems that we can work from. So any one of these could then become the main stem. So I'm going to go ahead and take the top of this off, even though it has flowers on it. I'm too concerned that this thing's going to really jack the plant up.
See, it's this type of stem that will never grow a tomato, and you'll get used to looking for them. There's the sucker.
There's a lot of suckers on them this year.
I know, I've never had so many. There's tomatoes all over them too. I like that.
Yeah, we'll take tomatoes. It can make you nervous sometimes looking at the plant and deciding what you're going to cut off, especially when they look so healthy and they're doing so well. But in the end, this is going to keep the tomatoes healthier. They'll last a lot longer through the season and produce a lot more fruit if we can keep it from wasting its energy growing those suckers and wasting leaves on the bottom of the plant. Oh, some of these suckers have grown really fast.
Yes.
It's hard to keep up with these things.
Oh, sometimes I just let them go.
Yeah, especially later on in the year when we're really focused on harvesting. We'll quite often just leave the suckers and let them grow. It gets to be too much to try to clip every one of those off.
This year is a banner year for suckers.
Now this string we're using is just standard baling twine for hay. You can get several thousand feet of it for little to nothing, so that's why we use it.
Just tie it loosely so it doesn't strangle the plant.
Yeah, you don't want to tie it up so tight that you're cutting into the stem. Use a nice square knot and just leave a loop around the plant. Yes, there are easier systems for tying up your plants, all kinds of little clips and stuff you can use. We found this works just fine. Once the tomatoes get far enough up into the trellis, we can just weave them back and forth through the fencing and they'll hold themselves up. We're really just trying to give a little bit of support here early on so that they stay near the trellis and grow toward it instead of away from it.
We got quite a few tomatoes in already. I hate to take one off that looks that good.
I know, it hurts sometimes to trim these things up.
Oops, sorry. Taking your string.
Take my string. What am I going to tie it up with?
Right. Some of these have 2 and 3 tomatoes already on them. Some of them are even blushing.
Oh, some fresh tomatoes finally.
Yep.
That's going to be nice.
That's not good.
You'll want to watch carefully while you're cutting. Make sure you're following the branch out and looking for the flowers. You don't want to cut a bunch of tomatoes off. But even if you do, this is early on in the growth cycle of the tomatoes. You're not going to damage it if you end up knocking off a few flowers. Yeah, you may miss out on a tomato or two, but the plant will put all of that energy it was using to try to make tomatoes into growth, which right now is more needful.
Well, these are vining tomatoes, so they're indeterminate.
Yeah, especially these. So that's a good point. There's a lot of different ways to classify tomatoes. Probably the first and most important is to understand whether it's an heirloom or a hybrid. So an heirloom tomato is a very stable species of tomato. If you don't end up with cross-pollination, you can save the seeds and next year you can grow that exact same tomato from those seeds. A hybrid is a tomato that's been selectively bred through cross-pollination. Because the pollen comes from one plant and it was used to pollinate a different type of plant
breed out disease.
To breed out disease or improve flavor. But that means that you have no idea what kind of tomato those seeds are going to grow at first. It takes a couple of generations to make it stable and turn it into an heirloom.
Unless it's an F1.
Unless it's an F1, yeah.
F1 hybrid or an open pollinated is going to produce a better tomato or closer to the plant.
So you need to know if it's a hybrid or an heirloom tomato. But you also need to know if it is a determinate or an indeterminate. An indeterminate will simply continue to grow. The tomato plant just keeps on going. In hot houses, they'll even let them grow all the way to the top of the hot house, and then they'll cut all the supports loose and fold the plant over on itself, and it'll simply keep growing and keep producing tomatoes. We try to grow nothing but indeterminates. We like the open-ended nature of the indeterminates. We love the tomatoes we get from them, especially the heirlooms. So we tend to grow those. And then there are determinate tomatoes. Now they're very specific. The tomato plants are almost identical. They'll grow only so many branches. They'll produce only so many flowers. And that means you're limited by the amount of fruit that you can get off of a single plant.
They tend to fruit all at the same time too.
And there's the big advantage. That means that all of your tomatoes are ready to harvest at the same time. So if you like to harvest everything all at once, one and done we call it, then you'll want to take a look at the determinate tomatoes. I guess in season, that's kind of nice to be able to just go out and harvest once, because we'll be picking tomatoes probably every other day once these things start producing heavy.
Well, and like I've said before, I'll core and score them and throw them in the freezer.
Yeah.
So that I can process them when I don't have so much to do.
That's why most people like the determinates, because they harvest at one time, and so all of their processing happens at the same time. Marty enjoys the core and score, so that makes it really easy to still process once but harvest throughout the season.
Well, once you stick them in the freezer and they thaw out, you don't have to flash boil them to slip the skins off. Once they defrost after they've been in the freezer, the skins just come off. So it eliminates that step. Plus, I'm not as busy in the wintertime.
Yeah, there's a lot less gardening to do in the winter.
Here's another cat face tomato. I'm gonna only pull one of those.
I really need to take that stem, but I hate to do it.
Don't. Why? Oh. I was gonna say, that looks like the main stem. It is.
There's your main stem.
I don't know.
This one's just as big, though.
Yeah, I would keep it.
Yeah, I'll tie that up.
Just look for suckers.
Grab that string.
Yep.
Throw some my way. Quite a few flowers.
Whoa.
Ready to make tomatoes over here.
Go down the hill. So you sit on your blessed do nothing to do it. I'm usually on my knees and going downhill. It's hard to do.
It's really hard to do on the hillside.
You want me to put that too? Okay.
Good job. So we've been noticing lately there's been a lot of really kind of a brown haze on everything. It looks like smog, which we're really weren't expecting to see here in Kentucky. We haven't had rain, significant rain anyway, in, a month?
Yeah, everything's super dry.
So we're really dry. Smog's starting to get thick. Let us know in the comments if you're seeing the same thing. Is the sky all gray and kind of has a brown undertone to it, or are you getting plenty of rain this year?
It almost looks like the skies in Nevada during the wildfires in California.
Oh yeah, man, that would get nasty.
Yep.
Something would be burning up around the lake.
Yep. You're talking about South Lake?
South Lake, yeah. We'd see fires that would burn for 3 months at a time. And when the wind blew the wrong way, it would blow it right down into Reno. And everything in town would be completely buried in smoke. We thought we had escaped the crazy wind events when we left Nevada. Out there we would get haboobs. So the wind would come up suddenly and blow across the sand, and we'd get a dust storm coming in. Here we don't get the dust, but we do get these weird little swirly winds that come in, pick stuff up, throw it around. Kind of like a tornado.
Which we have.
Almost looks like a living thing when it hits.
We've had a tornado go across our property.
Hoping we don't ever see one in person on our property.
Right?
They have been here.
We have a storm shelter.
Yeah, as you're looking for land yourself, always think about what the weather's going to be like. And if you are going to have issues with tornadoes, try to find yourself at least a property that has the potential for a good shelter area. But hopefully it's already got a shelter on it. The one we've got is buried into the hillside. It's made from a concrete septic tank, so it is solid as a rock, not going anywhere in any wind.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh.
They just turned the septic tank on its side and built a door frame for it.
I hope it wasn't a used one.
It does not look like a used one thing. So we're really concerned about the powdery mildew this year.
We got it bad last year.
Yeah, it did a number on us last year. So we're going to be doing everything we can to try to prevent that, getting good airflow underneath the plants. Trying to keep the humidity down underneath the plant so it doesn't get started.
Watering from the bottom.
Water from the bottom. Try not to get the leaves wet. Definitely don't let water splash up from below, if at all possible. And you can also treat the tomatoes in advance of the powdery mildew. To treat them, you want to use that 1 tablespoon of baking soda to a gallon of water and just spray the plants lightly, and that should keep the powdery mildew from starting. Now, if it's already growing, you're going to need a fungicide to kill it off.
It's still pretty warm out here. Oh. Big gap. We're not missing anything.
So once you get used to looking at the structure of a tomato plant, it's not that hard to decide what needs to come off. I mean, the suckers are obvious, but you can tell which branches aren't going to produce any fruit. And you do want to be careful to leave branches above where the fruit is trying to come on the plant. You don't want to take too much off.
Plus, I don't have my glasses on, so that could be a problem. That's how I cut the top of the last one off.
Yeah, well, I've already cut off a fruiting branch just a minute ago.
Trying to get glasses on.
If at all possible and you can bring yourself to do it, you should reduce these tomatoes down to a single stem. Marty and I have this really bad habit of seeing 2 very strong stems and not wanting to choose, so we'll just tie both of them up and make sure they keep growing. Not sure if that hurts our production or helps it. But we usually get plenty of tomatoes. So like this plant is actually divided into 2 really nice stems. So I'm tying a loose loop to kind of pull those stems toward one another so that I can then tie them up to the trellis, get them growing in the right direction. This one's got so much growth it's hard to tell where it cut.
You can tell those big stems though.
Yep. And there's so many times though that I'm leaving the sucker because it's growing straight up and the other branches are growing out and down.
I need lots of tomatoes this year. I ran out of pasta sauce. I ran out of salsa.
We think we have enough planted. Remains to be seen yet.
Depends on how well they do. Blight got them pretty bad. The other thing is about blight is it lives in the soil. And so if your tomatoes get blight, you need to not plant them there the following year because that fungus is still in soil.
Yeah, you want to be careful with the blight especially. If it was there last year and it consumed your tomatoes, it's going to be there this year as well. We had the tomatoes down in the tiered garden last year, so we've got herbs planted over there this year. Got the tomatoes moved out here to the main garden on the hillside. Don't be afraid to take off large branches like this. This one was growing out away from the trellis. It was going to be really hard to support that, and we're going to get plenty of fruit off the rest of the tomato anyway, so we'll go ahead and take those branches off. You see Marty and I both using Fiskars trimmers. She's got a smaller pair than the one I'm using. They make tiny little nippers for doing delicate work with tomatoes. We just happen to have these sitting by. That's why we were using them. Anything that makes you comfortable going in there and cutting around your tomato plant is what you want in your hand.
And you're going to have black fingers.
Yeah, that's just part of dealing with the tomatoes. Your fingers are going to turn black while you're doing this. Don't worry, you cannot wash it off later. It's still going to be there tomorrow. It's a sign of a happy gardener. Black fingers, happy gardener.
There's nothing better than a homegrown tomato, though.
It's true. Yeah, there's no comparison really between what you get in the store and what you can grow in your own backyard. If you've never grown a tomato plant and harvested your own tomatoes, you owe it to yourself to give it a try. Wow, I think we've got actually 2 plants growing up here.
Yeah, it happens.
Don't want to leave both of them? You want me to take one out? Yeah, this is 2 separate plants.
Yeah, I have been.
All right.
The only thing we can do is if we need another plant later on, we can cut it, take the bottom leaves off and replant it. It'll grow.
Yeah, when we were doing the video about trellising the tomatoes, we cut quite a few larger suckers off and planted them. We didn't do anything special. We just had some holes elsewhere in the garden. So we took those suckers and shoved them down in the dirt, pulled all the leaves off the bottom first.
They're growing.
They're growing. They're doing well, actually.
I'm glad tomatoes taste better and they smell.
To where I kind of like the smell of tomatoes.
Huh. I'll get me some tomato perfume.
Yeah, sounds good.
Nice.
Well, we're kind of running out of sunlight here and probably running out of battery in the camera. We've still got quite a few tomatoes we've got to get through. So I think we're going to sign off and kind of focus on just trimming these things up, making sure we do a clean job. We do appreciate you watching today. Please do subscribe. Hit that like button while you're in there, and we'll see you next time. And we've chased the sun out of the sky. So we're going to have to call it a day here. But we wanted you to see what this looks like when you're done. Hopefully once these tomatoes are fully up on the trellis, you won't see any branches anywhere near the ground. We'll get everything trimmed off of there and try to keep them up on the trellis.